Hello, and welcome to today's Defense Alliance webinar, Cybersecurity for Small Business, New DoD Requirements for Contractors, which we are presenting with our webinar partners, Beryllium InfoSec Collaborative. I'm Pat Lawton, the Business Director for the Defense Alliance, and I'm going to quickly give some information regarding how the webinar will flow today. We have an excellent lineup of speakers today, and because we would like to hear as much as we can from them, we will try to proceed with minimal interruptions. This includes keeping all of the attendees on mute to preserve sound quality for all. Also, because of the increase of people utilizing these web-based services under the current conditions, we will also encourage you to use the call-in audio feature if you experience any issues with the audio. You can find that call-in information on your toolbar. If you have any questions during the presentations, please feel free to use the questions chat box and we will address them to the best of our abilities. We will also be running a live Q&A at the end of the webinar, so be sure to stay with us for the duration. Due to the large number of attendees, we may not get to all of your questions, but please know that we will be saving and reviewing the questions that come in, and we'll get a follow-up to the group as soon as we can. And if you miss anything, don't worry. We will be making the recording of this webinar available to you all. So with that, I'll turn it over to our Executive Director of the Defense Alliance, Chip Langen.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're here in a crisp, bright, beautiful Minneapolis-St. Paul day. We hope that all of you are similarly blessed, and we're thrilled that you joined us. Thanks in advance to all our presenters today. As Pat said, we are with the Defense Alliance. We are a resource partner for the U.S. Small Business Administration, again, based in the Twin Cities, but we have members in 34 states. This is an effort to get important information out to everyone about the new Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certificate certification requirement for everyone that is a DoD, Department of Defense contractor. So you can see our mission on the screen, and we do have a very full agenda today. Pat, if you want to switch to that. This is the lineup, and of course the times are Central Time. I know a lot of you are scattered around the country. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Ms. Katie Arrington. She is the Chief Information Security Officer for the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition. And I'm told she's busy with some other things too, helping FEMA with some minor details these days too. So Katie, thanks for joining us, and over to you.
Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? I'm sure everybody is excited to see my wonderful, beautiful face this morning. So we're here today to talk about the CMMC and where we are, progress made, and I'm going to give a really, really quick summation of what it is first. Where we currently are and how you can access it, and some different websites that you can look at. And I do apologize if you hear my other computer bleeping in the other ground. I can't turn it off. So I am Katie Arrington. I am the CISO of Acquisition and Sustainment here in the Department of Defense. My favorite title, though, is Mom of the CMMC. If you're logging in today and you do not know what the CMMC is, don't worry about it. I'm going to get you educated. It is called the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. This is something that we have been working on for 1 year and 2 months here in the Department of Defense. We created it for small business, actually. It was really a pressure point. I came from small business. I owned my own woman-owned small business back in the early 2000s. I've worked at a large business defense contractor. I've worked at service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. And then I became a legislator, all about cybersecurity. It's always been a passion for me. And when I was in small business, and I own my own, there were some challenge points that made it hard to do work with the Department of Defense. There were always, it seemed, different standards, different rules for each branch of service or each government agency I was working with. And that was a struggle, because as small business, we really don't have this bench of people sitting off to the side to help us mitigate these issues. We're trying to do the work that we're doing. We're working hard to go out and capture new work. And when you don't understand what the requirements are, because they vary from service to service, it just makes it a barrier and it almost becomes too high, and you don't want to put the effort in. So when I came into the department, I took a very direct approach on how I could lower the barrier, make it easier for small businesses to come and help the Department of Defense. Reason why? Small business is the backbone of this nation. As we're going through this horrible pandemic, the nation is realizing how much we need our small businesses. So this, timing is I would say, works out in a beautiful way. Sometimes it's a little painful to get there. So back a year ago, I realized we had so many different cybersecurity standards, and nobody really had a grasp on what they were. Back in 2014, President Obama signed an executive order, and in that executive order, he wrote in to the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation, the DFAR, that all defense contractors would have to, if they touched controlled unclassified information, CUI, they would have to be compliant and self-attest, that's a big word, self-attest that they were implementing the controls of the National Institute of Science and Technology, Special Publication 800-171, I believe it's R1. And in 2014, that went into all the contracts. Now, they had until 2017 to actually everybody attest that they were doing that. The problem with that is that people really didn't understand what it meant. The NIST is a phenomenal institution. I cannot say enough about them. And prior to that, there is something called the NIST Special Publication 800-53. Now, these are two very similar standards. One is for federal systems, that's the 53, and non-federal systems is the 171. Now, if you go and you're trying to get NIST compliant, it's a little bit challenging to understand. So we took that. Then we took other standards that were out there, like the ISO, the International Standards Organization. They have an ISO cert. It's called ISO 27001. If you're a small business and dialing in and you're part of the Aeronautics Industry Association, they have something called AIA, NAS 9933. That's their cybersecurity. There's, if you're you work internationally, the UK has one. Now, granted, theirs is a little bit more about data privacy. Australia, all over the world. And what we took in the model are all of those different standards, and we brought them together into one. And because the way that DFAR clause works and you have to self-attest, it really wasn't fair to small business. And you say, why? Well, number one, when that rule change came in, we didn't really tell you how to build the cost into your rates. We didn't look at it like that. We just were in, this was something we should do, and nobody really understood the actual cost of implementation. Then the second part to it was the self-attestation. So I'm trying not to look at myself on this webinar, but can't help that. I think when I get dressed in the morning, I'm spot on, and then I'm on this camera and I see that my hair is not being my friend and I didn't do my eyebrow quite well. But it doesn't mean that I didn't get up with the best of intention, and I didn't want to be succeeding in looking decent today. It's the same with small businesses. We attest that we're doing these controls, the 110 controls, and the challenge is you probably are doing 50 of them and you have a plan, a POAM to do the other 60, but your rate is, I'll just say, $100 an hour. And you're self-attesting that you're doing it, and the government believes you're doing it because you're telling them you are. And they're unaware that you're not doing the other 60. Company B. Company B is got the same technical capability, the same bench of resumes. You're both bidding on the same type of work, but Company B is actually doing all 110 controls, and their rate is $150 an hour. Now, we all hate lowest price technically acceptable, but the reality is you're both technically acceptable, because all it says right now is that you have to attest that you're planning or you're doing the 110 controls. So we knew that was not the right way to go about it. We in the department wanted to centralize, so we went out, and we also understand that we are not resourced to go out. There are 300,000 companies in our supply chain. We don't have the resources in the Department of Defense to go out and inspect and audit every single company. So we needed to create a way that you, the small businesses, could get certified that you were doing everything that you were supposed to be doing, and that you were building your rates the right way. So we wanted to be clear that what we were asking for in this certification in the CMMC, we're willing to pay for, and to do cost realism. So we created the CMMC model. And what you see now, and I'm going to have to use my glasses on this, is our website. So this is the Department of Defense's website on the CMMC. If you look at it, it's open, it's publicly available. Everything is centralized here from the Department of Defense. In a minute, I'll show you the accreditation body's website. So if you have any questions about the model, you just click on CMMC model and you scroll down. Now, the best thing that I could tell you that has been the most beneficial for me, when we created this model, we based it on maturity. And we based it on 5 levels of maturity. Level 1, CMMC level 1, are 17 controls that are basic cyber essentials. They're nothing that you shouldn't be doing every day, and especially in these the times of COVID. It's really, really important that we're up on it. We're doing what we need to do, because our adversary isn't taking a day off. They're staying right in the mix. And if you're not protecting yourself day to day, you're not protecting your company. Now, what you see here is on the screen is the access control, AC. So there are 17 control families in the CMMC model. They, as I stated before, they go from level 1 to level 5. Most companies on this webinar are only going to need a level 1 certification. That means 17 no-cost controls that you need to do. You should be doing them every day. And I made it very simple, because I came from small business, because I was the owner. I understood that I needed to help get the team, we needed to create a model that would really be easy to use for small business, non-traditionals who'd never worked with the government before. We want to bring those people into our environment. So when we created the model, I wanted to make sure we did a few things. So as you see on the screen, and what I'm circling with my mouse, I don't know if you can see that. It's level 1, and it says AC.1.001. And it says limit information system access to authorized users, processing acting on behalf of authorized users or device, including other information systems. Now, to me, Katie Arrington 10 years ago, that's Latin. I don't understand what that means. I see that it references, there's a FAR clause that has that. So do I have that FAR clause in my contracts? I see that it's referenced in that NIST. Remember I said NIST Special Publication 800-171. It's also in the CIS controls. The same control is in the NIST CSF, and you can see where it's referenced. That's the Cybersecurity Framework. It's in the certification for RMM, same thing. And it's also referenced in the NIST 800-53. Remember I said 53 is for federal systems, 171 is for non-federal. And it's also referenced in the Australia's Essential 8. So that one control, if you were doing that one control and you were to go across all of those different standards, if you were implementing that control, you were compliant. Well, what does that control mean for small business? It's still hard for me to get my arms around that. So I'm scrolling through rather quickly, but I wanted you to be able to see that when we created it, I made a really big point that you can see on this. It says process maturity level 1 and process maturity level 2. We went through every single control that we had out there, and we explained how in English to implement that control. And I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through here really quickly to get to that one access control. Well, this isn't it, but I don't want to keep scrolling through. What you'll see is when you see a control, this happens to be the B.2.5. So it's further down in the model, but it gives the explanation of what it is. Establish and maintain the description of a defined process. That right there is the first session statement, is what NIST would have put in there, the standard. The second part is the clarification, so that you can understand in English. It translates it. So it says what it is. It references where it's seen in the model, okay? And we did that everywhere through the model. So as you scroll through, take your time and look at everything we put in there for you, because we did this with small business as our first, absolute power. You guys are everything. So we tried to make it as easy as possible for you to get in, understand, ask questions, and get prepared. We even went as far as you can see on this screen right here. As we walk through this particular one, the CMMC clarification, you'll see what the draft NIST says. We say the CMMC clarification, and then we give actual examples. You attempt to log on to your work computer. You mistype your password 3 times in a row. You call your IT help desk or administrator. The administrator tells you your account is locked. He explains that all the passwords lock after 3 unsuccessful login attempts. This limits the effectiveness of brute force and other password attacks. He tells you he can unlock it, or he can wait 5 minutes and the account will automatically unlock. So this isn't hard stuff. It's just making it so you understand what you need. Now, let's break to when and how does this impact you as a small business. So I'm going to take my screensaver off and go back to showing me. All right. So we are rolling out the CMMC. It's on the website that I just showed you. You can look at the model. It's very clear what you need to be doing. When is it going to hit my contract? When do I have to get certification? We are rolling out in June some Pathfinder RFIs, request for information, where we'll use different branches of service. We're using DLA, and we'll put out some RFIs with the CMMC in it. Now, they won't go on any current contract. So if you're currently on a contract with the Department of Defense, we cannot insert the CMMC requirement unless we do a contract mod, and it can't be a no-cost mod because CMMC takes money to get certified. So understand that the RFIs are going out. We're going to walk through this together. We collaborated with industry and academia to create the model. Our intent is to do this entire process with industry and academia with us as we work through the kinks. So for most contracts, and so I mentioned there were 300,000 contractors, vendors in our ecosystem, the DoD ecosystem. About 285,000 of them only will need CMMC Level 1 certification. The CMMC Level 1 certification, like I mentioned, are 17 no-cost controls that you should be doing every day. The audit should take less than an hour to 2 hours at your facility. You will be required to have a CMMC AB, the accreditation body, certified auditor come to you and validate the information. That won't take very long at all. The cost right now for CMMC Level 1 is under $3,000. That audit certification will be good for 3 years and be good for all Department of Defense contracts. So I know it's a lot to take in, but it really is, very easy and streamlined. We're not trying to add a burden to you. What we're trying to do is streamline the process. So when you go and you bid on work in late 2020, or 2021, and you look in it, it will clearly state what CMMC level for the required piece of work. So in sections C and sections L, it'll say the contractor shall, and when you're submitting in, it'll say what requirement, what CMMC level that will require. So you know very clearly what type of certification, what level you'll need to get. Now, level 1 is those 17 basic controls that are referenced in that FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation I showed you in that example. And like I said, it's about 285,000 companies that will need to get that. We're going to take 5 years to implement this. We're not turning the light on, in November and saying all contracts, we're going to roll it on. But understand that once you get certified, you're certified for all of DoD. So it's a one-time audit for every 3 years. Now, level 1 is just basic cyber hygiene. Level 2 is when we start actually helping companies put process in. You probably won't see a level 2 certification in any RFP or RFI. Those are really, it's for small business to create their business plan to get to level 3. Level 3 is when policy dictates your cybersecurity. It's because you're touching controlled unclassified information. You need to be doing all the controls in the NIST 171. That is a more in-depth audit. We have actually the figures, they're out. They'll be out for public comment in the next few weeks through OMB. We'll have a public hearing on them. But understand that everything that we're asking for here, for you to do, we understand the cost, and we made security an allowable cost. So we can do cost realism. So that when you go forth and you go for your certification on level 3, we understand how much it will cost. We understand how much each of the controls generally cost for a micro small business at 1 to 2 people, all the way up to a super large company. We've built that so that we understand what the rate should look like. So if you're coming in and you're bidding low and you don't have a CMMC certification yet, because we're going to make the level, your certification, to be due at the time of award, we'll say, hey, we need you to come back and relook at this rate based on the CMMC level 3 that you're trying to get this work for. You probably need to relook at your rate. So we're trying everything to make this as streamlined and to reduce the burden of doing work with the Department of Defense, and to make it a very clear and concise ask with requirements that get certified by a third party. We don't want to slow down the system. That's why we moved to the model to the CMMC accreditation body, to let them handle certifying and training the auditors. So we have what they call C3PAOs, which are cyber third-party audit organizations, and individual small businesses. A lot of auditors have signed up, sent in their information so that they can become a certified auditor. The people that will be coming in to do the inspections, the audits into your company from the accreditation body, they will have a background check. They will be certified, they will be licensed to be there, they will be signing NDAs. They're not to take any of your proprietary company information off site. They can't come in and sell you product. That they're not there to solve your problems. They're there specifically to audit. They can direct you to the AB, the accreditation body website to get, if you need to, supplement with a cybersecurity as a service product, they'll have them available. It'll be an open marketplace. But the goal is to buy down the risk and buy up the uncertainty on the adversary getting into your systems. And as we're all teleworking, and I think that this will become a definite change of culture, know that our adversaries are very busy. We have watched over the past month the ransomware attacks go through the roof on small businesses. We're trying our best to give you the tools, the capability to protect yourself, to defend your own company, because our national defense depends on you. We in the DoD, we don't build anything. We look to you, our contracting community, our vendor partners. You are our national security. And if you're not at the highest and best security working, then we aren't. So this is the best way we felt to get this done. By no means is it a perfect process. We'll be working through it together. This has been a collaboration from the start. I have no intentions of stopping it, and know that the person who's trying to create this started off in small business, and I come from that place of goodness to really help. So it is now 10:29. My time is up at 10:30. I'll be around for the Q&A portion, but thank you so much for an opportunity to talk and to give you a level set about the CMMC. We are rolling it out into RFIs in June. You'll start seeing it in very select RFPs in November, and then it'll be a very strategic rollout. It will take us 5 years, folks, to get this fully implemented. The reason being is most contracts have 1 base year and 4 option years. And you remember at the start of the conversation, I said that I couldn't just insert the CMMC into a current contract. So know that we understand this is going to take a minute, but also remember, once you're certified for 3 years, and you're certified for the whole of DoD. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. We appreciate your prescient remarks. We have a ton of questions that you inspired. Pat, are there any that are pressing that Katie can answer, or do you want to move on?
Let me unmute myself. There we go. Yeah, there's a couple of general questions about, for instance, auditors. Will auditors have to be accredited for all levels, or can a CMMC auditor be certified for just one level?
They can get certified for levels 1 through 3, and then they can get certified for levels 4 and 5. So we're going to have 2 different levels.
Great. Couple other questions. There's some pretty technical ones here, which we will probably have to answer in writing. But some of these are asking about, do subcontractors have allowable costs in order to meet level 1?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me
Because
see.
remember I said that it was going to cost about, up the high end would be $3,000 to have the whole, and that is including the cost of the company getting ready for the assessment and the actual auditor coming in and paying for the auditor. So we're looking about a $3,000 mark, and we absolutely understand that's an allowable cost.
Okay, great. Here's an interesting question that perhaps you might have some insight on. Do you see any challenges for overseas companies in relation to the CMMC certification, or do you have any advice?
Did you like my camel mug?
Yep.
Yeah, actually, we're working with our international community on this. Why we baked in Australia, Canada, and the UK is because this is an international endeavor. Our Five Eye partners are very, very interested, and I want to make sure that US companies have an equal playing field. So if you're bidding on work for the Department of Defense, I don't care where you are in the world, you got to get CMMC certified.
Okay, great.
So we're working with the international community. I will take a minute here and give you all a little history lesson. So after World War II, we had something called MIL-SPEC. If anybody on the webinar knows what that is, it's how we defined quality and safety in manufacturing for the defense industrial base. At the same time, our NATO partners had the same standard. They called it the NATO spec. And as we realized we were going to be working together, and that we were both saying that it's like the Tower of Babel, we were both saying the same thing, but in a different dialect, we came together and created the International Standards Organization. That's how ISO came to life, was actually when the Department of Defense and the NATO partners realized that they had to speak the same language. We're seeing this with the CMMC. It is definitely, it's in the, if anybody on the line has read the National Cyber Solarium report, it's noted that that they need to have a baseline standard in cyber, and the CMMC is definitely the place to start. It's in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2019 in section 1648. They actually wrote it in that this needs to be the standard. So we are definitely moving out to make sure that this isn't just a DoD standard, that it's a whole of government. And I hope at one point it becomes standard for the world.
Great. I'll leave you with one more question here. People are wondering if a company can bid on a contract prior to achieving that required CMMC level.
Absolutely, and we want you to. We are only going to require the CMMC certification at the time of award, very specifically at the time of award, because it's going to take some time to get there, right? If you think that you're at level 3 right now, right, and you have that DFAR clause in your contract, and when you actually look at the model and you're like, well, I'm not doing that, we want you to have the time. We want you to be able to get the right resources. You have to decide, are you going to do this internally and organically in your company, or are you going to outsource that control, that requirement? Are you going to get cybersecurity as a service software to maybe implement it? So we definitely want you to get in a place to be successful. So only at the contract award will we require the level certification.
Great. All right. We've come to the end of your time slot. There's still many, many questions, so we'll come back to you on the Q&A. And again, for those of you submitting questions, please know that if we do not get to your question today, we will be sending a follow-up where we can address most of these questions.
All right, so I'm going to click off my camera. I'm going to go on mute for a minute and continue to work. And when the Q&A starts, I'll be here for you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Katie, very much. Go fill up your coffee mug and get back to work for DoD and FEMA and the state of South Carolina, I believe, wherever else you work. We're very appreciative of your efforts. Good luck. We're pleased also to have Wayne Boleen join us. He is a director at the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Accreditation Body. That's a mouthful. So with that, I'll turn it over to Wayne, and hopefully you're up. Looks like you're up and running.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not going to subject you to the camera, so you won't have to see me, partially because I didn't clean up and partially because I pace and have to stand up while I'm presenting, so that would be difficult. So I'll try and get us back on schedule if my computer cooperates. That's all you're going to see of me. As I said, my name is Wayne Boleen. I'm a director on the board. I'm going to do a real quick recap of what the board is, what's going on. Katie spoke to it very briefly, some of the activities we have going on, and I'll present that. So this is the website she spoke to, where you can view the CMMCAB activities. You can sign up to get updates. This is the general organization of the accreditation body. Each one of those functions there has an associated committee. I'm going to go over those real quick and some of the things they have to do. So who will oversee the assessment and certification process? As Katie mentioned, the model was developed and then was handed off to the accreditation body. The DoD asked industry to create this nonprofit corporation agnostic organization. That was formed in January. The MOU between the DoD and the AB, which defines the legal relationship, was signed on March 17th. So the AB is responsible for creating this ecosystem, and you can see some of the things we're responsible for, and Katie alluded to some of those things. It's licensing trainers, training the trainers, training and licensing the 3 PAOs, issuing certificates. This new term's coming out, organizations seeking certification, OSC. Those are the, many of you here are organizations that are going to be seeking certification. And the AB overall is all about the process of fielding the model into the field. How's it organized? It's registered right now as a non-stock corporation in Maryland. It consists of all volunteer board members. All of us have full-time day jobs that we have to do in addition to this. There's a representation of small and large organizations from a wide range of stakeholders. The directors serve as individuals and not representatives of the organizations or companies they're employed by. individuals seeking to serve as an assessor or affiliated with the 3PAO are not allowed to be a director due to conflict of interest. And all of us on the board have signed COI documents and ethics documents and are really focused on making the CMMC successful. How is it funded? The AB does not expect to receive any funding from the DoD. As of now, we have a budget of 0. So when some of you, we've gotten some comments about how the AB website looks, and I would ask everybody to understand it's not where we want it to be at the moment, but with no money, we're trying to meet the requirement of getting the information out and making a presence while still working with no budget. We have several financial folks on the board that are looking for funding options. The signing of the MOU helps that process. We have an application in for a 501c3 that's still pending under IRS. And organizations and other entities that are looking for grant or lending opportunities should reach out to our chairman, Ty, to propose different opportunities to him. Where is it located? In the short term, looking for a physical headquarters within 50 miles of the Pentagon, probably Maryland or Virginia. Long term, we expect to have a nationwide footprint. COVID-19 kind of drove the virtual presence. We were already working virtually because we're all spread out all over the place, but this further solidifies that and allows us to have a nationwide presence to meet the industry needs. Will the CMMC-AB conduct assessments? No, as Katie alluded to, there are independent licensed assessors that will be employed by a C3PAO, excuse me, that will vouch for the methods and conducting the assessments. The assessments will all be subject to a Q&A process that's being designed before the certification is issued by the AB. And if there's any kind of disputes over a particular level or control or process or anything along the lines of the assessment, there will be an adjudication process to resolve that. How can you get CMMC certified? Well, right now you cannot. The version 1.02 was released on the 18th of March. The AB is working on defining standards, infrastructure. I'll cover some of those activities later in the slide with the committees. And right now there are no CMMC AB approved assessors or PAOs right now. That doesn't mean you can't get ready and start preparing for the CMMC. This is a question I field and the other directors field all the time is, well, what can I do to get ready? Because most companies who are dealing with the DoD, I won't say most, I guess that's an overstatement, many companies are dealing with the DoD at the DFARS. You should be DFAR compliant, which is based on NIST 800-171. So a good approach, if you anticipate being level 3 or above, is to take NIST 800-171A and CMMC version 1.02 and use that to evaluate your organization. If you're at full NIST 800-171 compliance with no POAMs, because CMMC will not allow POAMs, you are almost there. There's 20 additional CMMC controls or practices above that are filling in the blank, but getting fully 171 compliant is a good start. Start creating the associated documentation. This is advantageous even if you're doing level 1. And I threw in this statement: do not pay for pre-assessments. There's a lot of folks out there selling very expensive pre-assessments that cannot guarantee you'll meet a CMMC assessment because that process doesn't exist yet. But be very careful about consulting and paying too much for something that can't guarantee compliance. As I mentioned before, go to the website, sign up for the mailing list. All major changes will be announced via that website. There's events the board's going to be having, they're called national conversations, that are going to focus on specific subjects, how to become an assessor, how to prepare, those sorts of things that'll be subject-based. So how can my organization become an assessor? Right now you can't. Sign up for that mailing list. We're finalizing the training, all the things that go into becoming an assessor, and that will be announced via that update mailing list from the website. Important to note, if you're looking to be a C3PAO or an assessor, you cannot consult to the organization and then also assess them. That's a conflict of interest. So you kind of have to pick or choose. Do you want to be in the consulting business or the assessing business? How can you get involved with the AB? I know that there are several working group members on here, but the board has created several industry working groups and are going to be creating more to address specific subjects. Industry, academia, government participation is welcome and encouraged. Several have been created. There will be more created. Keep an eye on that. Don't be disappointed if you aren't selected for a working group, because as you can imagine, the demand is overwhelming. And to keep the working groups manageable and functional, they have to be kept relatively small. So there are a lot of folks who are very qualified to help out that can't be selected, but please understand, everybody's interested. So very quickly, I'm going to go through, and what time I have left, to go through the committees, the primary committees that are stood up. I'm a little biased. The communications committee is one of the most important ones, in my opinion, because to be successful with CMMC, communication is critical to those wanting to consult or be assessors, to companies that are going to be subject to the assessments, internally to an organization that's getting ready to deal with CMMC. You're going to have to educate and communicate to your internal stakeholders, the finance people who have to pay for it, the business decision makers who have to fit CMMC requirements into the overall business decision-making process, everything. So communications is very critical. Standards Committee. The top three considerations the Standards Committee is looking at is ensuring the requirements are clearly understood. That's very critical, because to prepare for assessments, you need to understand what the requirements are, the standards are, what's necessary to meet and sustain a certification. I'm not going to read the slide, but as you can see, a lot goes into taking the model as it was built and then transitioning that into a standard and fielding it to those organizations seeking certification. Credentialing Committee, top three considerations there are delivering a method and training to the assessors, defining the assessment methodology, and then finally the process to becoming a certified individual or organization delivering the assessments. We want to ensure that high quality assessment capability is fielded and scalable to address all the companies needing assessment, to make sure everybody's in place, ready to perform to the contracts that are going to come with CMMC provisions in them. Training, obviously training is critical. There's a lot going on with the training committee right now. I participate in this one, but in order to deliver those assessors, we have to have high quality, scalable, and comprehensive, effective training to the individuals who are going to be coming out to your companies and performing these assessments. The Infrastructure Committee is all about building the infrastructure to allow the board to operate. It has to be secure. We have to go through the same sorts of things you would as a company with supply chain assessments to make sure the tools we have are secure and perform to what we need. There's a database you saw in that initial org chart that's going to hold the certifications for all the companies, and the DoD will need to make use of that database so that when they're out looking for companies to perform on a contract, they have the ability to know or to validate that any given company is certified at the appropriate level to perform on a given contract, whether it's level 1 all the way up through level 5. And it looks like I have us back on schedule. There's my email address, the CMMC-AB website I threw up at the front. And I guess I could field a few real quick questions and still keep us on schedule.
Thanks, Wayne. Much appreciated. Pat, any questions that jump out for Wayne specifically, or should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, I'm just looking through. Sorry, I'm trying to aggregate at the same time they're coming in here. It looks like a lot of these are more general. So let's move on and keep on schedule, and we'll address some of these in the Q&A.
Okay, thank
Sounds
you.
good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. Appreciate what you do. Next up, we're going to switch to two folks from Carnegie Mellon University, Katie Stewart and Andrew Hoover. Katie is a senior member of the technical staff CERT team at Carnegie Mellon, and Andrew is senior engineer CERT team at Carnegie Mellon. I understand that these folks were instrumental in designing the CMMC process itself and have quite a bit of technical knowledge and process knowledge. So thanks for joining us this morning, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. So I'm Andrew Hoover. I'm a senior member of the technical staff at the Software Engineering Institute. The SEI is a federally funded research and development center at Carnegie Mellon University. So we have a long history of developing maturity models. We've also done a lot of research around process maturity and cybersecurity capabilities, which is one of the reasons that the DoD asked us to participate in the development of the CMMC. So my colleague Katie, who's also on the line, and I have been working on the CMMC since the beginning. We're two of the primary architects of the model, and we've been leading several of the working groups. Katie, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Katie Stewart. Happy to be here, and I think this should be a good discussion. Thank you.
Okay, so on the picture here or on the screen here is a picture of the model itself and of the architecture. Think of the CMMC as having multiple dimensions that make up each level. There's the practice dimension, which is on the left-hand side, and those are the leveled practices. And then there's the process dimension, which is the right side of the model. Now, those familiar with NIST 800-171 will notice that all of those security requirements are included at levels 1 through 3 on the practice side of the model, along with 20 additional practices that we thought were important for a well-rounded security program. So we started creating the CMMC. It's important to note that there was a really strong desire to ensure we weren't creating another checklist, which is why the CMMC was developed implementing a maturity component, as Ms. Arrington talked about. And that is the right side, or the process side of the model. That guidance came directly from Ms. Arrington, and so what we did was we implemented 5 processes in the model, starting at level 2 and going to optimizing at level 5. So the implementation of these processes are intended to basically demonstrate that an organization is capable of performing the practices at a specific level today, and also ensuring that you can sustain that performance in the future, which is a lot different than some of the other standards that just give you sort of a point-in-time reference. Katie,
So
you want
I'm
to
going to
talk about CMMI?
Yeah,
Yep.
Sure. So I'm going to give a little history about CMMI and the CERT RMM. Both of these references are foundational to the CMMC. So you may or may not be familiar with CMMI. It was developed by SEI, by the Software Engineering Institute, starting back in 1985. CMMI was originally developed to assess software quality for the Department of Defense. So it measures process institutionalization and performance improvement across the organization, specifically originally with software development. It's expanded the scope significantly and now is being used across a variety of different sectors. And we no longer manage it. It's being managed by the CMMI Institute, but it's still used a lot in industry. If you fast forward a decade or so, the SEI and the CERT program, we developed the CERT Resilience Management Model. So what we did is we took our foundational knowledge from CMMI and we combined that with our experience in both resilience and cybersecurity and developed CERT RMM. So CERT RMM is leveraged heavily in CMMC, both on the process maturity side and the overall architecture of the model. So it's foundational to CMMC. It's also publicly available. I know when Ms. Arrington spoke, she pointed out some RMM references. So those are all available to be downloaded. It's free for use, and it also gives some more guidance on implementing some of these practices within CMMC. Andy, you want to talk about the maturity processes in CMMC?
Okay, sure. So what you see on the screen now are the 5 processes that are integrated into the CMMC. Now, the first thing that most people notice is that level 1 performed is not listed. That's because there are no processes at level 1. Ms. Arrington mentioned this earlier when she talked. A level 1 organization is just performing the 17 practices at that level, and perhaps in an ad hoc way. Okay, at level 2 is where process maturity is introduced into the CMMC. Level 2 is documented. At level 2, an organization has a policy that comes from management that lists all of the 17 domains, and you're also documenting procedures for all of the practices. Now, it's important to keep in mind that the model is cumulative. So the documentation requirements, as well as the processes, apply to all of the practices up to the level that an organization is attempting to get certified against. So, for example, if an organization wants to achieve CMMC level 3, the level 2 and level 3 processes apply, but the documentation requirement also applies to the level 1 practices. Remember that an organization achieving just level 1 doesn't have those requirements. An organization achieving a level above level 1 will inherit those requirements because the model is cumulative. Level 3 is managed. This just means that you have a defined plan that you are managing and includes objectives and resources. At level 4, the organization is regularly reviewing their practices and processes and making adjustments as needed. And then level 5, they're optimizing their efforts. Katie, do you want to walk us through a use case?
Sure. So what we wanted to do today is really look at what this looks like in practice. Those that are familiar with 171, you may not be familiar with the process side of the model. So we really want to look at what that looks like as a specific practice progresses through process maturity. So let's consider Bob. Bob is in charge of IT at his organization. He's a small business, maybe there's 5 people, so Bob might be in charge of more than just IT, but Bob is charged with IT in his organization. If we consider the first practice within CMMC, which is in the access control domain, it's AC.1001, limit information system access to authorized users, processes acting on behalf of authorized users or devices. So as Andy said, at a level 1, there is no required process maturity assessment. So when Bob's company is going for a CMMC level 1 certification, Bob will just have to prove to the assessor that he is simply performing AC1.001, along with the other level 1 controls. So to do this, he assigns a unique username and password, and he ensures that his users can only access what they have permission to access. So again, at level 1, Bob is simply performing the level 1 practices. So let's move to level 2. If we look at level 2, this is where process maturity comes into play. If we continue on our example, Bob has done a great job with CMMC level 1, and his company has maybe grown in size, maybe they're about 20 people now. So Bob's management comes to him and says, you know what, it's time for us to pursue a level 2 CMMC certification. So what does this mean for Bob? Like Andy said, now at level 2, process maturity is going to be assessed in addition to the practices, and it's cumulative. So the level 2 process maturity requirements apply to both level 2 practices and level 1 practices. So at a level 2, an organization is expected to be documented. This means that the organization has a guiding policy for all level 1 and level 2 practices, as well as documentation for these practices. So what does this mean in our example? For AC 1.001, there is an access control policy that comes down from senior management. This policy will demonstrate that leadership understands the importance of the access control activities, and it should lay out the expectations for these activities that include things like purpose and scope and roles and responsibilities. The other thing that the policy does is that it directs the development of documented practices. So Bob knows that he has to document all of his activities to satisfy the access control policy, and this will include AC 1.001. So at level 2, there's an established policy that includes the scope of that practice, and the practice is documented. The documentation of the practice just ensures that the practice can be repeated. So if Bob, moves on to a different role, or if he gets sick and he can no longer perform that practice, somebody can step into his role and complete that practice based on the practice documentation. Andy, can you give a few examples about what this would look like in an organization?
Yeah. So firstly, it's important to note that because we're saying that you have to have policies and procedures for all 17 domains, we're not saying that you have to have 17 individual policies and documented procedures. It's really up to the organization as to how they want to tackle this. So if you are preparing for your CMMC assessment, maybe you find it easier to organize your policies and your procedures based on the CMMC framework. Maybe you just document them individually, 17 different documents. That is absolutely not required. Some organizations can and very likely do have a larger security or a larger policy document. Perhaps you have an IT security policy or an IT security plan that may cover 17 of the domains. It's really up to the organization as to how they want to approach this, and it probably depends on where the organization is starting from. A lot of organizations are going to have a lot of this work done, and so it's just a matter of identifying where you are and then figuring out how you want to organize things and filling in the gaps.
Okay, so let's move on to level 3. Bob is doing a great job with his IT role, and his company is growing by leaps and bounds, and now they want to pursue a level 3 CMMC certification. So at a level 3, an organization is expected to be managed. Specifically for access control in AC 1.001, Bob is managing his activities according to a defined plan. This plan should talk about the goals and objectives, as well as the resources required to carry out access control activities. So when we talk about resources, we're obviously talking about funding and people, but we also include the tools and the required training to carry out these access control activities. At level 3, in addition to just defining the resources, Bob must also demonstrate that his access control activities are resourced as defined in the plan. So in other words, Bob needs to show that he has what he needs to get his job done. There's a variety of different artifacts that can be used to satisfy an assessment on process maturity at level 3. Bob can use a traditional project plan. If he's perhaps following an improvement plan, that can be used. Any sort of resourcing or budgeting plans that are used. Even an organizational chart that shows he has, the right people in the right place. These can all be the types of things that Bob can use as artifacts for level 3. Basically, what the assessors will want to know at level 3 is that someone is behind the wheels steering and managing the access control activities. And this will look different for every company. It will just be based on how you choose to do your management. The other thing here is most companies will likely use a variety of different artifacts. They will all kind of come together to be used to satisfy the requirement at level 3. Andy, can you talk a little bit about the scoping at level 3?
Yeah, sure. So depending on how an organization allocates its resources, the plan may encompass all of IT security or be split up by domain. Again, I think it's really important to emphasize that it depends on where an organization is starting from. Katie just mentioned that a lot of this work is already going to be done, most likely, in an organization. It may just be scattered in different documents. And so collecting it and organizing it, is definitely the first step here. So some organizations may have a overarching IT plan. That IT plan might have a section for cybersecurity, and as long as the necessary domains are mentioned, 17 domains are mentioned, within that plan, then that is perfectly fine to pass this practice. The important thing is that all of the domains are covered with sufficient detail to include the information that Katie just discussed. And when we talk about resources and what level of resources are required, it's the level of resources required to complete the activities that you describe in your plan. It may be necessary at some point and even likely to rebalance those. Make sure that you have the resources for the plan and make sure the plan is accurate based on the organization's activities. And so that's a part of this as well. Katie?
Okay, yep. So moving on to level 4. Despite Bob's expression on the slide that his company is doing great. They're doing fantastic in the defense market, and Bob's management comes to him and says, Bob, I have great faith in you. Let's try to get our level 4 CMMC certification. So at a level 4, an organization is expected to be reviewed. So the requirements at level 4 include the establishment of metrics to measure the performance of its access control activities. So Bob just wants to ensure that his access control activities are producing the expected results. So what does Bob do? He sets up periodic reviews of his access control activities, and this includes AC 1.001, and he defines a set of metrics to collect. For example, Bob, he may decide he wants to measure the percentage of access requests that are denied. That's important to him. So he collects his metrics and he performs periodic reviews on his access control activities. And if he finds issues, he takes action against those issues. In addition to that, he also sets up periodic communication with his higher level managers to inform them of the status of access control activities, as well as any issues that may arise around these activities so that they can be properly addressed by management. Andy, do you want to add anything about level 4?
Yeah, just quickly, the assessor at level 4 would be looking for things like status updates for access control, or changes to the access control plan to ensure that it's still in line with the policy, or vice versa. Maybe they are documenting any risks that are standing in the way of them performing access control the way that they know that they need to, or the way that their policy or plan document their access control procedures. The intent is just to make sure that the organization is reviewing their activities in such a way that will allow them to rebalance, to ensure that things are working as expected and that the policy, procedures, and plans are all in line.
Okay, thank you. So now we're on level 5. So Bob's company decides to pursue a level 5 certification. So the difference here is there's also Sue. So both Bob and Sue are responsible for access control activities within the organization, but within 2 separate business units. So at level 5, processes are optimizing. So what does this mean? Bob and Sue use standard enterprise-wide guidance for their access control activities. So, they'll go pull it off the SharePoint or off of Command Media, and they get the standard guidance for their access control activities. But what they do is they take that guidance and they tailor it to develop specific procedures for each of their business units. That again, it's based off of the standard enterprise level guidance. In addition to this, Bob and Sue, they go about their jobs and they're carrying out their activities, but they recognize when there are areas for improvement or areas where they could gain efficiencies in their activities. So what they'll do is they'll communicate these back up to the enterprise level. And because the enterprise level, they're optimizing their processes, these improvement activities are then communicated across the organization. So Bob and Sue and the entire organization, they're in this continuously optimizing loop around their processes. Andy, do you want to say any more about optimizing?
Yeah, so it's important to note that most organizations will not need to be at level 5, and very likely shouldn't be at level 5. Level 5 mature organization has spent a lot of resources to get to level 5, which means they have taken those resources away from other activities that may be better suited to spend on. So think of level 5 in the context of an organization that has like an enterprise CIO office or a CISO office that maintains policies and plans for the entire organization. Bob and Sue can modify this in their respective business units as long as they're performing the minimum as defined in the policy. So what this does is it provides consistency because everyone is meeting the minimum, even though they may be modifying it just a bit. And as Katie said, when they identify a success, there's this feedback loop. So they can share that success back into the enterprise policy where it can then filter down to all of the operating units in this optimizing loop, like she said. And it looks like we are ahead of schedule, so we can go ahead and take some questions if there are any for us.
Hello, yes, we have many questions waiting, so thank you so much. I'll just start working through them here. Here we go. The CMMC discusses policies and processes. Will the CMMC be releasing templates for the SMBs to use?
So that would be a question for Wayne and the accreditation board. I would suggest that folks monitor the AB's website, and as they develop those things, they can post on that.
Okay. Thank you. And maybe we can get to that one at the end Q&A question as well. There was a question here earlier as you started your presentation about clarifying whether the maturity is at the control level and or the domain level.
That's a good question. So both, it kind of sounds like a cop-out answer, but as Andy said when he provided some clarifying guidance to the example, an organization is not required to have a policy for every domain or one practice per CMMC practice. So what the assessor is going to look for is just that the scope of what you put forward in the assessment covers the entire CMMC scope. So in access control, taking the practice that we used as the example, you actually may have 3 or 4 documented practices that meet AC 1.001. And that's okay. It will just depend on how you organize your material. The flip side of that is, you may have one policy that spans the multiple domains or all 17 domains, but as long as you're meeting the entire scope of CMMC, you should be good to go with the assessment. So we're not dictating and the assessors will not dictate a one-to-one, checklist of material, just that all of the activities that are cited within CMMC are covered in what you bring forward.
Great, thank you. Next question. CMMC requires an SSP, and then for process maturity, they ask for a policy and plan, which seems to look kind of similar to the the SSP. Do you have to do a plan plus the SSP, or just a policy statement and SSP?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like we said back early in the presentation, you're not required to have an individual policy or plan for all of the domains. So it's really up to the organization to figure out how they want to organize things. What we tried to do was list the minimum elements that those things should have. So, what are the minimum elements of a policy? What are the minimum elements of a plan? Why are they important? If if the elements of the policy and the plan that are laid out in the model exist in the SSP, it's perfectly fine. If they exist outside of the SSP in another document, it's perfectly fine as well. The important thing is that they're in place and that they're being followed. It doesn't really matter how they're being documented, just that they are in fact documented and are being used.
Okay, great. Good, we're still doing okay on time. All right, so this question says, Andrew, it says, hi, Andrew. You stated that in level 2 organizations don't need to have one policy per domain, but CMMC v1.02 states the maturity processes are repeated in each domain. And so just wondering if you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, certainly. That's also a good question. What we mean by that is that those maturity or policies apply to each of these 17 domains. So you don't have to have 17 individual policies to satisfy like the process for for having a policy for access control. You can have an IT security policy as long as that IT security policy covers all 17 of the CMMC domains. That's perfectly acceptable. In that case, you would have one overarching policy, IT security policy, covers all 17 of the areas within the CMMC. That's perfectly acceptable. So you don't have to have 17 individual policies. Now, if you're starting from scratch and you want to obtain a CMMC level 2 or above, maybe it's easier to organize them individually into 17 individual policies. But the important thing is that when we say that those policies apply to all 17 domains, it just means that you have to have a policy that covers access control as well as the other 16 domains within the CMMC, not a single individual policy for each one of those things. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, great. Looks like we have time for one or two more here. Someone is asking if we can sign up now to get quote unquote in line to be assessed by a C3PAO once they are licensed. If not, how will the order of assessments be determined?
Again, that's the question for Wayne and the
Okay.
AB. Yeah.
Got it. Let me assign
Yeah,
that.
if Wayne is still on, he can field that one.
Okay. Wayne,
I
you want to?
can.
Sure, go ahead.
Can you repeat it one more time so I don't miss anything?
Yep. People are just wondering how they can sign up now to get in line to be assessed by the C3PAOs.
You can't get in line yet because there is no line. That process is being developed. Again, the best way is to sign up on the AB website to be notified of various milestones and things happening. And the way, obviously, in the initial stages, there will be limited resources as far as the number of assessors, and the priority will go to those who are involved in the Pathfinder that Katie spoke to, that will have a contract or an RFI, RFP, something stating they need it. They will come priority if there's limited resources. After that, the process for prioritization is still being worked out.
And just as a follow-up, Wayne, is there any timeline set for that yet, or is it still being worked on?
Well, I'll defer to the DoD's timeline that's in Katie's presentations that she's been speaking to at various events. She didn't provide those slides for this event, but you can find them relatively easily online. We're working to the DoD's timeline.
Okay, and then just one more follow-up on that. How does an organization become a part of the first cohort of the C3PAOs to be trained?
Again, keep paying attention to the AB website, sign up for notifications. All that will come out via official notification from there. If you hear anything separate of that, take it with a grain of salt.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, looks like we're semi caught up on questions, which is good. We have a lot of good ones coming through, and so please, attendees, you feel free to keep sending those questions in. And again, we'll get to those as we can. Otherwise, we will respond to those after the webinar. So thank you so much. And Chip, if we want to kick it over to you for the transition.
Thanks. And Katie and Andrew, thanks so much. Wayne as well. We're prompting a lot of good questions. As Pat says, I think we have well over 100. So we will do our best to aggregate that and get answers to you. If not at the end, most likely with an email at some point in the very near future. Thank you again, Katie and Andrew. And we're now pleased to hand it over to Emily Harmon, owner of Emily Harmon Coaching and Consulting. She was also a senior executive service employee of the federal government, SES, for those of you that know that. So we're blessed to have, like Emily, like a lot of these folks, people that have done the small business side, large business, been inside government and outside government. We've got the great lineup of expertise this morning. So Emily, over to you.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Just making sure my hair looks as good as Katie's. I really enjoyed listening to the earlier presentations. I think that Andrew and Katie's scenario where they walked through with Bob was so helpful. And one of the things I want to say is probably, a lot of small business owners are overachievers. So you're probably thinking, well, I don't know if level 1's good enough. I want to be level 5, but hopefully you realize, level 1 is good enough for a lot of you, and it's where you need to be. So don't worry about trying to be an overachiever and get to level 5 if you don't really have to. So I'm going to go off the camera now and then just show my slides here, which is not that many, but let's see. So can you see them? You can see my slides?
Not yet, Emily.
Okay, let's see. Let me go back. I must have collaborate with others. Sorry, I think I hit, what button is it that I have to hit? I know we did it yesterday.
Let me take it back and then I'll send it to you again. Just 1 second.
I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. There we go. These things happen.
Show my screen. Okay.
There we go.
We had it for 1 second there.
Okay, Emily, we're not getting your screen, so I am going to, I believe that Chip has a copy of your presentation, so I will kick it over to Chip and he can go through your slides for you here.
Okay, it should be up on the screen, Pat.
Great, yep, you just want to maximize that and we should be good to go. Okay, Emily, are you still there? Can you see the slides here?
No, we've lost your audio.
We have lost our audio. Okay, that's all right. We will give her just 2 minutes. Oh, I see a call coming into me. Just 1 minute. Okay, folks, we're going to have a little quick change of agenda, and I love doing this to Derek. Derek, do you want to hop in and just talk a little bit about resources for small business here as I get Emily set up on the audio feed? Her audio feed is giving her a little bit of a hard time here, so I'm going to work with her offline if Derek wouldn't mind doing his. So I'll kick it over to Derek if you're set. There we
I
go.
am. Thank you. No problem.
Great. Thank you.
I'll show my screen here. You guys will let me know if it comes up. Right. You guys able to see my presentation?
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yep.
Cool. Well, thank you again. This has been a great event. I know we've had some technical difficulties here, but the original plan for this whole thing was to be in person. We had a great registration list to take this as basically a half-day event. So part of that was going to be kind of a solutions panel at the end that's really focused on small businesses and what they can do to start getting the requirements into place. And the beauty of that was that we're already seeing through Katie and Andrew and through Miss Arrington and Wayne alike on just the different aspects of CMMC and hearing that information from all sides. It's important to a small business. So I'm with Beryllium InfoSec Collaborative. We have been in business working with DIB customers well before the CMMC was out, and the focus has always been on DFAR 7012 and the NIST 800-171 controls. So those that are looking for that separation, really, in that advantage that they can get from getting the requirements in place, whether they're in your contracts now or you want to go get that business from the DoD, this is the focus, and it needs to be focused on small businesses. So rather than have a presentation in person, which we can't do, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time today because we want to get to the Q&A and to Emily's presentation when she's ready to go. But we're going to do a Q&A solutions panel for small business defense contractors on Tuesday, April 28th at 10 o'clock Central Time. And that's going to be about the Quick Track solution, which is an affordable and practical way of businesses getting their maturity in place so that they are aligning themselves to succeed within the DoD supply chain. And it's a collaboration solution. There's going to be a couple different vendors, and we've worked together versus apart from each other to focus on the DFARs and NIST 800-171 requirements and get those in place now, because we have to, as Ms. Arrington said, and others have said as well, we need to keep our adversaries out of our stuff, and this is how it's going to get done. So information will be coming on that here as we follow up the event. So be on the lookout for that. But if you can go to our LinkedIn page for Beryllium InfoSec Collaborative and follow along there, follow our page, you'll see plenty of announcements on that event in a couple weeks. And we'll have people from companies that you've heard of like Duo and Virtru and Nectar Labs and training partners like InnoPro IQ and ourselves and a couple others, just to talk openly with you, the DIB customers, on creative ways to get this done in an affordable and practical way. So with that, that's all I was going to get into. Yeah, okay, cool. So if Emily's ready to go, I'm 100% ready to pass the baton back.
Okay. Somehow I got kicked out, and you guys are so popular that it's full, so I couldn't get back in. So I wanted to just talk quickly about strategies for implementation for CMMC. I think that there's been a lot of great points made already. One, my first bullet is just keep up to date on the CMMC through official channels. And those official channels, have been given out today, like the website for the advisory board and things like that. So just keep up to date through official channels. Also, consult with free resources such as your local PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistance Center, and the Defense Alliance. The Defense Alliance is free, and so is the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. And if you haven't worked with them, they're good to work with, and they see a lot of clients, and they can take some of the lessons they've learned maybe from one client, apply it to the other. So those are always good resources. Also, implementing the NIST 171 controls. Do it now, and that includes your plans, policies, and procedures that you would need to have once you get to level 2. But don't wait for, a while for, like an RFP to come out that you're competing for, or something like that. Just go ahead and do it now. And I apologize that my dog decided to start barking right when this is happening. The next thing that I wanted to point out is talking to your core, your contracting officer, or your prime contractor, because, I think a lot of what we've been talking about lately is kind of assuming that maybe you're a prime contractor, but if you're a subcontractor, you're going to have to do this as well. And so you also need to know if your company has access to controlled unclassified information. And sometimes that would require, talking to the prime contractor or your core or the contracting officer. And then sometimes you don't really need to have access to that information. So I'd make sure that the information you do have, that's controlled unclassified information, is stuff that you actually have to have in order to do your work. If your company has to become CMMC level 3, that's the next thing, is to prepare now. You should be developing your resource plan with your budget, assign personnel and the required tools. There's no better time than now to start preparing for this. And then start implementing the controls now. Like, don't wait until like a week prior to the audit to say, okay, let's make sure we're ready. Start doing some internal testing, or, applying the controls and seeing if they're working now rather than, right before the auditors come. And then don't forget the non-technical controls. Like, the auditors are going to be looking for proof that you're doing these things, like testing, backup, reports. So really keep good records, and that applies with anything that you're doing in government contracting, but especially for this. Just make it easy on yourselves and the auditors when they show up. The less time they spend there, the less time that it takes away from doing the work that your company is meant to do. So those are my bits of advice that I would have for the audience today.
Great, thanks, Emily. Appreciate that. And flexing with the technology here. We've been through Derek. So at this point, we are a little ahead of schedule. That's a great thing because there are a lot of questions. And hopefully we've got everybody on the line still, possibly even Katie Arrington. So Pat, I'll turn it over to you to kind of go through some of those questions and see if there's some others that we've left behind and have been waiting.
Katie's still on.
Okay, great. Well, I will bring it back then. Yeah, we've got a number of questions that can be addressed here. So let's take a look at this now. Okay, a point of clarification. Someone was wondering, while CMMC pre-assessments may be a little bit premature right now, many companies must still be 800-171 compliant under the DFARS and can benefit from an assessment. Is that correct?
Well, they can. So let me be clear. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. There's nobody who can certify you on NIST today. NIST does not offer a certification. You definitely can have a company come in and consult that are, that's what they do for a living, that they come in and they consult, but there's no such thing as a NIST certification. So if anybody is telling you that you'll get a NIST certification, there are people that come out and make sure that you're compliant with the NIST standards, but they don't offer you a NIST certification. Just want to make sure everybody's clear on that.
Okay. There was a question specifically directed to Katie during the presentation here about, will CMMC follow the DFARS making process where the public can comment?
Absolutely. We are in the process right now, and the public, I mentioned that we were OMB, OIRA, that we, in the next couple of weeks, will actually have the public hearing as soon as we're allowed to with COVID. Absolutely. And it was scheduled for the last week of April. I do not know the current status on that. And as soon as I do, I will put it out on the website. absolutely going to be public comment.
Great. Another question came in. Will companies be required to recertify if they are bought or merge?
So that depends on how they set up the legal transfer of the company. So if they're buying it and they're not doing anything to integrate, they're just buying it for the financial, you're not changing the enterprise network, you're not changing the architecture, it's just a financial purchase. The enterprise and the system are certified. If they're integrating it into a larger company or commingling, yes, because you're going to be changing your posture, how you're set up.
Great. Another question came in. When it comes to risk management, will the assessors be looking for what risks are identified and the fidelity of the risk assessment / mitigation, or will they just be looking at practice and process? And anyone here, the panelists can jump in. I think you're all unmuted.
Katie, the other Katie, you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. So if you look at the risk domain, some of that will be covered there during the management and then the measurement of your risk management activities. But as Andy talked about, when you get to a level 4 certification, that looks at measuring on the process side and reporting out your status. And part of that measurement is measuring the risk to your activities. So the assessor will look at that in terms of measurement at a level 4. And then again, if you're going for a level 3, some of your risk management activities may be used as artifacts for that as well. I think I answered the question.
Great, thank you. Here's another question. Go ahead, Wayne.
This is Wayne. It feels like the question's being asked about, is it looking at if there's a process in place or is risk management policy, et cetera, going on, or will they dig into it and provide a value judgment on, is it the right thing? I think if that's the case,
no,
it's going to be a no, because there's more than one way to skin a cat, and I don't think anybody wants to get into a discussion or argument or evaluation of, well, you're doing risk management, but you should do it this way or that.
Correct. Wayne's exactly right. And that goes back to, that kind of applies across the board. So you'll see an assessment guidance, exactly what Wayne is talking about. The assessors on the process side will be looking at the attributes of the artifacts, and this applies to risk management and how you do your measures, but nobody's going to say, you were not doing this right. They just want to see that, you're behind the wheel and you're driving and managing in a way that makes sense in your organization.
Thank you.
Which may differ from other organizations.
Go ahead. Feel free to expand if you need to.
Yeah, I was just saying, Katie just said which works for your organization. That will differ from organization to organization, and so they can't just dive into those policies and say you're not doing this the way that I think you should be doing it, because everyone's going to be doing it differently.
Thank you. Another question about price point. A lot of sort of banter on the questions about price points and how much this is going to cost. So it was mentioned that the price point for level 1 is under $3,000, excuse me. People are wondering if there's a price point that you could give for levels 4 and 5. Any estimations there?
So this is Katie Arrington. It depends. So I can tell you between where we're seeing right now on the OMB OIRA side is it ranges, but it depends on the company size. It can go from 25,000 and that up to 50 is what we're seeing. But that's, like I said, that's a big delta because it's a big variant, right? You're talking about, a micro small company all the way up to the bigs. So, and we've built that into the rates. That, like I stated before, that is monies and funding for the company to get prepared for the assessment. So you got to think that, if you're getting ready for an assessment, it could take you, 2 to 3 weeks to prepare, to make sure you've got all the documentation. Then the cost of the actual assessor, the auditor to come in there, and their cost of doing business to do that. I will say that how we created the rates that you'll see in the public hearing is currently the DIB CAC, it's the Cyber Assessment Council in the Department of Defense. It's through DCMA. They have been doing evaluations on the NIST 171, and that's how we derived the analysis of what it would look like to cost. So I would say pay attention to the public hearing dates, look at the website. We're keeping the AB up to speed as much as possible, but that is not locked in solid.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one.
Was that a question relative to assessment or just cost to get there?
It just was a price point. Yep, cost to get there as well.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Someone is wondering if they're oh no, sorry, my screen moved. About subcontractors or contractors working, will they also be covered under the certification, under the enterprise certification?
So this is Katie. No, unless that's how the prime is doing the work. So if you're a subcontractor, and I'm going to use the example, it's just because it's they're large. If you're a subcontractor for Lockheed Martin, and they are having you go into the Lockheed Martin cloud to do work, and not have you get a login to their cloud system, to their approved, then you're going to have to just be a level 1. That's on like level 3, right? It's how they're furnishing that environment. If you are not, and you're doing it and they're just giving you the work, you're a direct subcontractor to them, you're doing the work, it's your network, you as a company need to get level, and I'll just say 3 certified for this example. So we've made it flexible enough that companies can work in the business models that they're currently working in. So if you work on that model right now, we don't want to change the boat, but you are going to have some level of certification. So you may, level 1, just to be doing business with the Department of Defense. If the particular work that you're doing is CUI, and the way that you're working with your prime is you're actually going into their environment, or they're providing you a laptop that is on their network to do the work, then they would hold the level 3. You would be required to be level 1. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Someone is wondering if systems that don't store or contain CIU data need to be included within that CMMC certification scope.
It'll all be level 1 then.
Okay.
And no.
Great. All right. We have a lot of questions coming in. Sorry, some of them are pretty specific. Okay. Are there any grants available for implementing the new requirements?
So we are working right now, and I will take this moment to, kind of interject. Prior to COVID, we had specific things. I am not, there's been a lot of change in that. And not to say that it's changed in what we're going to be able to do. I just need to wait till the government gets back into our offices and we're really working again at the end of the month. But in the meantime, we absolutely have 1000% and continue to work with the PTACs. If you don't know your PTAC, go, Google PTACs, get to your professional technical assistance center. They are through the DoD. That's how we are reaching the small business outreach out of the Department of Defense, is going to the PTACs. If you also go to Dreamport, it's called projectspectrum.io or IC, and I will make sure that at the end of this call that I get you that information. There are already a great deal of free tools, free education, free training for small businesses to get help with the CMMC. So there's the PTACs, there's Project Spectrum, and then there's also what's going on at Dreamport. And I'll make sure that you all have the to send out to everybody all of those website locations. We absolutely have assistance for small business.
Thank you. And just a clarifying question here. One of our participants said that typically each DoD contract, as you know, is managed and run separately by a team within a DoD contractor. If each contract is in a separate logical boundary, will each one need to be certified separately, or will there be some organization level controls? Just want some clarification on that.
I'm sorry, and I'm sorry to everyone listening. Can you repeat that? I didn't follow all the way through.
So this person is saying that typically each DoD contract is managed and run separately by a team within a DoD contractor. If each contract is in a separate logical boundary, will each one need to be certified separately? There would be inheritance to some organizational level controls, correct? So I think just certifying or just restating that it will be at the organizational level rather than each separate contract.
Yes, absolutely. So sorry. So all of the inside the DoD, we work in a couple of different platforms that we all go through whenever a Corps is getting ready to award work, even on the simplified acquisition. Every company will actually be noted in that. Part of what we're working with the accreditation body on is that when a license is issued to a company, we will populate the company's SAMS registration number, their DUNS number, their cage code. So it'll all populate automatically. So no matter where the Corps is, they will have access to your certification. It will update. The systems update every night. So it wouldn't be in real time, but it would be within 24 hours. So everybody in the DoD will be able to see your certification. You're not going to have to, as a small business, run through the hoops to submit it to each and every different contracting shop. They will be able to see it from inside the DoD.
Great, thanks. Okay, next question. So here's a question. What risk do we, the subcontractor, have if DFARS 7012 is in our current contract, but we don't have 800-171 fully done? Anyone want to take that one?
No, legally, there's not, if they were to come out today, so there was a block change memo signed in February of 2019 from the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, the Honorable Ellen Lord, that made cybersecurity part of the contract business systems. That's how we've been able to do the DIB-CAC audits. Those, remember I just discussed those, and assessments. What can happen right now is if they come out and they do the audit and they deem it to be unacceptable, and they have a rating scale, they can issue a CAR. So you can have things go against you right now. It depends on the level of, whether they would come in and audit, much like if they were to come and audit if you were a manufacturing facility and you were found to be non-ISO like 9000 compliant. What will happen in the future is your certification will be a go, no-go decision. So you either are certified or you aren't. There isn't any ambiguity. And, the person who asked that question is going down the pipe of where most of this goes to. Why do we really need this? I think at the end of the day, the next few years are, you look at your driver's license and a driver's exam. When we first started driving, and cars first came along, and before my time, believe it or not, there were no rules. We all jumped on the road and, you were just driving wherever you wanted. When we realized that we had to share the road or the highway, the information highway, we decided that there needed to be, standards, rules that we all had to agree to abide, to reduce the risk of hurting each other, hitting each other, and causing damage. So states started developing driver's license exams. and tests. And then you had to go and you took a test to evaluate how much you understood the risk, and that was determined if you could jump on the highway. But the execution, the day-to-day, was your insurance rate. Your insurance rate reflects how well you follow the rules. If you don't follow the rules and you get pulled over and you get tickets, your insurance rate goes up. So I think where you're going, if you Google cybersecurity insurance, I think this is what ends being the end state. It's not the current state now, but I think that the CMMC and your rating, and every company on this webinar today know that if you have a public facing IP address, you currently have a security rating. You may not be aware of it. It's just like an Equifax, TransUnion credit score. You have a security score that says how you are being looked at through your public facing IP addresses. So I think that at the end game, you know, how do we get responsibility? How does it play out for the subcontractor in a year or two from now? If you are non-compliant, you have passed an audit and you're not doing something you should be doing, and a exfil happens, you will absolutely be liable if you aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing. Today, there aren't a lot of teeth in it. There's not, you know, we can issue a car, but we don't want to do that. That's not the intent of the CMMC. That is not the intent of the Department of Defense right now. We don't want to come out and gig you. We just want you to get better and let us know how we can help you do that. Because like I said in the earlier part of this conversation, we depend on you, we need you. And our job right now as a collective is to get better. So if you're not doing the entire 171 right now, reach out to us and let us help. Call your PTACs. Call, you know, look at how there are ways we can help you, and we're not looking to put you out of business by any stretch of the imagination right now. That's not our goal.
Thank you. We do have a number of specific questions, which I will save for our email follow-up. But I wanted to ask the panelists if they wouldn't mind just giving, you know, a brief 1-minute sort of closing statements about your thoughts on the certification and any other points that you want to kind of re-stress as you go. So let's start with Emily Harmon, if she's able to access the audio here. I think you probably are. Any sort of final comments?
My final comment would be that just to keep up with the latest that's going on with CMMC, and reach out for help if you need it. If you don't know all the answers, it's okay. There's lots of people that can help you. So that would be my bit of advice.
Great, thank you. Let's kick it to Katie Stewart and Andrew from the CERT team at Carnegie Mellon. Any closing remarks or anything you'd like to stress again?
This is Katie. So I just stress that everybody, you know, continue, like Emily said, read what's coming out, what's being put out by the DoD, what's being put out by the AB. You know, use that as your guiding resources on this. The SCI is also preparing some material to help educate on the ideas around process maturity, as well as some examples. We have a slick sheet up that kind of walks through this Bob and Sue example we went through today. And, you know, ask questions, learn from your peers on this. There are a lot of smart people out there, and you know, we're here willing to help and, you know, move the needle forward, because this is an important endeavor. Andy, you want to add to that?
Sure. You know, I would just say that the idea behind a maturity model, and one of the reasons that the CMMC was developed as a maturity model, is to be able to help organizations understand their cybersecurity capabilities, not only today when you're going through an audit, but also understand how you can carry those capabilities into the future. And we think that the process maturity component of the CMMC really helps that. And so the long-term goal here is that this could actually help drive organizational change to more of a cyber culture. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Wayne, I'll kick it back to you. Any last thoughts?
Just that I want to stress that everybody should get on board with this, understand the intent is to protect national security, to deal with the threats, embrace it. In the short term, focus on NIST 800-171 compliance, and this is a team effort, and we're all in for it.
Thank you. And lastly, Katie Arrington, any final thoughts as the mother of this?
The mommy of the CMMC.
That's right.
You know, I just, all of the people on the call, the panelists, thank you, right? Because these guys are all doing this from a collective of goodness and wanting to help. And to the people on or listening to the webinar, the DoD needs you. I can't stress that enough. We're hoping the intent on this is to streamline it, to make it easier for everyone. But more importantly, the biggest goal out of this is getting you protected, buying down the risk and buying up the uncertainty of the adversary coming into our supply chain and doing harm to you as your business. We need you, so you staying open and viable and valid, and providing some of the best innovation this country has ever seen is critical to our national defense. Don't think that what you're doing doesn't matter. It absolutely does. We are only as good as our weakest link, and we are not here to gig you. This is not about penalizing. This isn't about doing anything other than doing our utmost best as a collective to get the best cybersecurity we can, so that, you know, I get all on this emotional thing when I talk about it, but this is the truth. We as a country, as this great democracy, we thrive in the delta of buying down risk and buying up the uncertainty. If you clear the path for small business in this country and you do your utmost best, we answer the call, you answer the call every single time that the nation has ever asked, the world has ever asked. So bear with us while we do this. Don't give up hope. Don't think that anything that you're doing, we want to come at you and throw lawsuits. That's not our intent. That is not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to make everybody as safe as possible so that we can be here 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Chip, you want to, any last comments here? Chip?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. Thanks, Katie. Great summation to all of our presenters today. I want to know that we greatly appreciate what you do every day, what's done to get us to this point. I know there's a lot of Bobs and Sues out there and others that feel a little bit better, at least how to start the process and where they can go. There are a lot of resources. Katie mentioned the PTACs, there's SBDCs, there's all sorts of resource partners that the SBA has. We're one of them. This is not our area of expertise, but we know where to send people. And this is an investment in small businesses. Questions was, you know, are there grants for this? A better question is, are you strategically invested in being a defense supplier to the point where you can invest in your own cybersecurity? And this is going to cost you for most companies. And there are great resources as well that are private, like Beryllium InfoSec Collaborative, that have great solutions for you. So reach out to us, reach out to Beryllium. We're here for you. This presentation will be on our website, hopefully by afternoon once this gets processed. And for those that had colleagues that couldn't get on, and others because of the bandwidth issues that we had and the interest in this, we will follow up with an email to point you to that recording, and we'll also send you by email the presentations that were presented today, along with answers to many of the questions that we didn't get to. So best to all of you, stay safe on the cyber world and otherwise, and we will see you next time. Take care.